Hello everyone, this is Consulting 101. What is consulting and why is it for me? Now this presentation is geared to people who have never really heard of consulting or have heard of consulting but don't really know what it's about. This presentation is going to outline exactly what consulting is and why it might be a great fit for you. Now to introduce myself, I'm Michael. I'm a fourth year accounting student, and you might be thinking accounting, well why aren't you doing accounting? Well, I did accounting up to my third year, and I continued up to it until fourth year, but in my third year I really realized that it wasn't really where I wanted to be. I talked to a lot of different accounting students, and I realized, you know what, I'm just not as passionate about accounting as some of these other friends that I have. So I decided, you know what, this is scary, but I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try to get a job somewhere else. And eventually I got to this path where I'm like, you know what, I would really like consulting. So hopefully throughout this presentation, you'll kind of look into consulting, you actually consider it as a career, and ultimately, hopefully, I hope you apply, get involved in our society as well. So our agenda for today, we'll be starting with just looking at consulting in general. Second, we'll be going to the different types of consulting that exist. Third, we'll be looking at the different firms that offer consulting services. And fourth, we'll be looking at the perks of consulting and ultimately why it's awesome to be a consultant. So let's start with what consulting exactly is. As you can probably tell from this slide, consulting is a lot of different things, but let's look at the big picture definition. Think of consultants as doctors. So if something's wrong with your body, let's say you're not feeling well, something in your stomach, you know something's wrong, but you don't exactly know what's wrong. And that's when you go to the doctor, and the doctor essentially helps you find out, what exactly is wrong with your body, what's going on, what kind of sickness, what kind of illness do you have. Well, that's really what a consultant is for a company. If a company is having issues, they might see, hey, our revenue is declining and it's been declining for the past 3 years. Well, why is it declining? Well, there's this, but why exactly? That's when they go to the consulting firms. Consulting firms help solve problems, just like doctors help us solve problems. So really, consultants are the doctors in the corporate world. Now, if we look at the other aspects of consulting, it is broken down into a lot of different things. That's what's really great about consulting. You can specialize in almost every single industry, whether it be technology, whether it be media and telecom, whether it be, financial services. There's so many different industries you can work in. And best of all, you can really be an expert in a lot of different fields. So if you want to be an expert in mergers acquisition for financial services companies, you can do that. If you want to, be an expert in sustainability and environmental problems, you can do that. So there's really a lot of different things you can do in consulting, and that's really what makes it so great. So now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, consulting's so big, it's so broad. Well, in reality, consulting's kind of broke down into 3 main portions. And you kind of see this when you're applying to different firms. There'll be strategy roles, management roles, and technology roles. Those are kind of the 3 aspects of consulting, and everything else falls under those categories. We'll be going into each one specifically. So to start with, we have strategy. Now, strategy is kind of the big picture. It's really what the company should be doing going forward into the future. Some questions companies may ask is, what market segment should we be targeting? What country should we be expanding into? What company should we be acquiring? There's a lot of different questions that a company can ask that are strategy specific, but most of the time they have to do with the big picture, the high level questions that, companies don't really know how to answer themselves, so they hire a consulting firm to do that for them. Next, we have management consulting. Now, management consulting is less about the high level, and it's more about the how. So it's really becomes more about the implementation and how you do a certain thing. So some questions, for example, would be, how can we make this product or service profitable? How can we expand into this country? Or how should we expand into this country? How do we cope with our increasing expenses? So as you can see, there's a lot of hows, and it's a lot more focused on implementation. There is some strategy involved in some management roles, some management consulting roles, but it is mostly about the how and about the implementation of things. And last but not least, we have technology consulting. Now, technology consulting, compared to the other 2, is really the newest type of consulting. And under technology also exists digital. And technology and digital is really the fastest growing segment in consulting for a lot of different firms. And we see a lot of firms investing into technology and digital specific. We look at Deloitte, they have their own Deloitte Digital. We look at McKinsey, McKinsey has McKinsey Digital. So there's really a lot of investment going in technology because firms are finding that companies have the most problem with technology because things are changing so fast that companies are having essentially struggling to keep up. So that's why they go to these consulting firms to get help. Now, some questions that can be asked with technology consulting would be, how do we integrate this new technology that we want to get with our current existing SAP systems? And how do we share that data? Another question could be, how do we go about implementing this CRM? So there's a lot of different questions, and if you think about all the different technologies, it can become very, very specific. Someone can specialize in SAP project systems specifically and just specialize in implementing them in the banking industry. So it can get very specific in technology consulting. So now that you know a little bit about the three roles in consulting, let's take a look at the firms. So essentially the firms are split up between three classes. First is MBB. Now what MBB stands for is McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. Not necessarily in that order, but that's essentially what it stands for, is those three firms. And the reason MBB is in its own class is because these three firms focus on strategy, and they are very prestigious firms. If you think about let's look at the US school system for universities. MBB would essentially be Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford compared to any other university. So they're really high up there. They do a lot of high-level strategy work, and that's what they've always specialized in. Next, we have the Big Four. Now, when you look at the Big Four, you might think, oh, but those are accounting firms. Well, not necessarily. They're professional services firms. Yes, some of these firms might get most of their revenue from accounting, like PwC, but there are firms that do get maybe even around half of their revenue from consulting, like Deloitte. So a lot of the Big Fours, they will have consulting wings. Deloitte's probably the biggest one, especially in Canada. If you were wondering, yes, this is a Canadian-based presentation. But Deloitte has, for example, strategy work, management work, and technology work through Deloitte Digital. So a lot of the Big Fours will do work of all three types of consulting. Then finally, we have Tier 2. Not necessarily that they're worse than any other firm, but they tend to be bigger consulting firms that do some sort of work or specialize in something. If we look at A.T. Kearney, very, very big firm, very respected. They do a lot of strategy and management work. We look at Oliver Wyman. They also do a lot of strategy and management work, but specifically for the financial services industry. They really specialize in that. ZS and Associates, they're kind of a marketing consultancy firm. Accenture is also a very big consulting firm. They're a public company, but they do all three types of consulting, and they have their roots in technology. So that really, there's a lot of different Tier 2 firms. I've only put 6 in this presentation, but if you do your own research, you're really going to find a lot of firms that specialize in a lot of different things. If you look at the big picture, every single firm you look at is probably going to have some sort of strategy, management, and technology consulting. But you're going to have to really dig in deep and see what they're best at. So if you're really looking to do strategy work, you're going to want to aim for that MBB. If it really doesn't matter to you and you want an overall experience, you're probably going to want to look at Big Four, maybe Tier 2, because they offer all three types of work. Now, one thing I did leave off this list in the firms is that there's also boutique firms. Now, what boutique firms are firms that specialize in some sort of consulting. And I only left it off because boutique firms are small, and there's so many of them. Every single city in the US and Canada will have their own boutique firms. So, for example, there's a firm here in Toronto that specializes in banking regulation. So it's like a team of 15 people at this firm, and all they do is provide consulting for banks that need help with regulation. So it gets very specific. It becomes that narrow for a lot of boutique firms. So if you're looking to get into some sort of boutique practice, that's research you're going to have to do for yourself. So now that we know a little bit more about the firms, let's look at the roles in consulting. Now, because this is kind of an undergrad-focused presentation, we're not going to go further than manager level for this presentation. If you want to know more about the progression throughout the different firms, that's something you're going to have to look into yourself. But in general, it kind of starts like this. You start as an analyst out of undergrad or something along the lines of an analyst. Maybe the name might be a little different depending on the firm. But as an analyst, you're usually in that role for 1 to 3 years, depending on your performance. Your total compensation is between 60 and 90,000 Canadian. And the different responsibilities you have is building slide decks, working with data and analytics to provide insights. You're doing some project management work, and you're doing case cracking, which is essentially helping companies solve the problem, the case at hand. Next, you move on to consultant. You get a promotion. Congratulations. And you're going to be here for about 2 to 3 years, depending on your performance. Now, you're going to be making a lot more, between 100 and 130 in total compensation. And total compensation includes bonus, by the way. Now, your responsibilities are pretty much the same. You're just doing more of the same, pretty much. Analytics, slides, project management, case cracking. But now you might see that leading has been added because you'll be leading your own analysts, providing them help, providing them mentoring and support, making sure that they're really on track to succeed. And then finally, we go to manager. Now, manager is not the last step in consulting, obviously, but it is really the next big step that people try to make it to. You're a manager for essentially 3 to 5 years, maybe more, depending on your performance, and you're making around 150,000 Canadian plus, so it can really go above that. Now, this is probably one of the hardest roles to get into because as an analyst and consultant, you can be an analyst and a consultant for up to 60 years, and you're doing really pretty much the same thing. But as soon as you hit manager level, your responsibilities essentially shift. So now you're doing a lot more project management. Now you're doing a lot more case cracking. You're working on the problem. You're doing a lot more leading, right? You have your own team of consultants. You have analysts that you look after. And not only that, but you're doing selling. So you're really going out to clients. You're trying to build your own client network, and you're trying to sell projects. So the analytics and the slides, you're not really doing anymore. You're leaving that to the consultants and the analysts. So this is kind of just a really small, big picture of, well, I guess small, big picture, that didn't really make sense, but it's really kind of the big picture of how you progress throughout these firms in these various roles. So now you know a lot more about consulting, the firms, the type of roles, what you really do as a consultant, and you should essentially be able to piece together why you should be interested in consulting. But in case you haven't, I've really broken down this into 3 main aspects. First, learning and development. That's probably one of the biggest reasons to become a consultant. You learn so much, and you probably saw from one of the first slides, you're doing so much different work, different functions of work, different industries of work. You're really learning a lot. You're getting a lot of knowledge, and you're really developing yourself at the end of the day. There's also a saying that says 1 year of experience in consulting is 2 years of experience in industry. Now, you might be wondering why that is. Well, it's most likely due to with the fact that you're working 70, 60, 80 hours a week, whereas in industry you'd be working 40 hours a week. So that probably has something to do with it. But at the end of the day, this is learning and development. You won't get anywhere else. If you're an accountant at an accounting firm, you're an accountant working in different industries, but ultimately you're just doing accounting, right? So consulting just really opens the door to a lot of opportunities. Next is salary and performance pay. This is also a big one. Out of undergrad, if you're not a STEM major especially, you don't really have a lot of opportunities that pay a lot of money. Maybe if you're a finance grad, you might be lucky to land that investment banking job. Congratulations, 6-figure salary, but that's not really realistic for a lot of people. Now, especially as a business student myself, I didn't really have a lot of options going out of undergrad. So I found consulting paid a lot more money compared to some of the other offers I was getting at 40, 45, some even at 35. So generally, strategy pays the most. In Canada, you make around 75,000, give or take your signing bonus of 5 to 10,000. Management, you're making around 65, plus 5 to 10 for the signing bonus, and technology is the lowest at 55, with the signing bonus of 2 to 5. Now, that's not necessarily to say that strategy is better than technology. It really depends what you want, but strategy is more competitive to get into, so they pay a higher salary. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, if you look at the 5 years, 10 years down the line, you're making the same amount of money across all these 3 fields. It's just really the starting salaries that are different. And finally, we move on to exit opportunities. This is also very big. You're getting experience in consulting that is relevant to almost every single industry and almost every single Fortune 500 company. So whatever you want to do, you can move on to an MBA. Consulting experience is perfect for that. You can move on to a Fortune 500 company in a management role. You can move on to entrepreneurship. You learn so much about different businesses. You want to start your own, you go for it. There's so many different things you can do when it comes to consulting and eventually leaving consulting if you don't want to stay. Because at the end of the day, if you're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, it is a hard lifestyle. You really have to be committed to it. And a lot of people can't do it. But that's okay. Consulting firms know that, and they're really there to help you find those opportunities. Because they know that at the end of the day, if you leave the firm and you move on to, let's say, shell, then they know that eventually you'll make it up and they'll be able to sell you projects. You know, you're going to go to your alumni at Deloitte or at Accenture or at McKinsey for different projects. So that's really why a lot of consulting firms, even though you want to leave, you're not leaving on a bad note. They want to help you succeed in the industry that you want to enter. And that concludes Consulting 101. What is consulting and why should I be interested? I hope you've gained some new knowledge on consulting, what it exactly is, the firms, the roles, what you do in consulting, and I hope you're going to take that and consider it and maybe think about a career in consulting because it really is something great that a lot of students don't really know about in their undergrads. So hopefully you're going back with some new knowledge, and I do urge you to stay connected with us. We're the Guelph-Humber Consulting Association. You can find us on Facebook. We have a lot of different events that we host on campus, not only networking nights, not only info sessions, but we also do case mocking with each other. So please do join us if you are interested in consulting and stay connected. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a good one.